Hi, I'm Bill DiGilio. This is the second video of my series called Keyboard Harmony. In this video, I'd like to take the scales that we learned in the previous video and show you how we're going to build chords from them. Now, just to review, let's take a brief look at what we talked about last time, just as a review. Our major scales are made up of a pattern, and that pattern is whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step. For example, key of C major, or C major scale, I should say. Whole step, half step, whole step, half step. And as I said, once we follow that pattern, all major scales behave the same. All major scales use that pattern. So just to review, that's our C major scale. Let's take a look at our G major scale. G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G. Remember, to make that whole step, we have to go from, we can't use F in the key of G, we have to use an F sharp. Now let's take a look at our F major scale. F, G, A, B flat, C, D, E, F. Because remember, we have to go whole, half, so that makes the formula work. We can't use regular B or B natural, because that would be a whole step. There we need a half step according to the rule or according to the pattern. So those are our three major scales, the first ones that we want to learn. Now let's take those major scales and take from them what we call chords. Now a chord is simply a collection of notes that we're going to play at the same time. For example, if I play these three notes at the same time, I get a chord. Now, here's how we're going to find chords using the notes that are already in those scales. I'll show you how we'll do that. Let's take our, and this is a very pattern-based thing, so once you get the idea, you'll be able to follow it through on your own. Okay, so the great thing about music is once you get the pattern, it applies to all the cases. Okay, there are actually 15 different keys in our harmonic system in Western music. Okay, now I know that sounds daunting, but the main thing to remember is once you know the pattern applies to all 15. Now, if you don't want to learn all 15, that's perfectly fine. That's your decision. But keep in mind, having a pattern makes it easier to follow and makes it easier to remember. Okay? So even if you don't need to know the C sharp major scale, you could figure it out knowing that pattern. And if you ever decide you want to memorize it, that's certainly possible too. But let's just say we don't need all those keys. Let's just take the three we're working with right now. So let's find our chords based on the C major scale. Here's how we're going to do it. Let me take my right thumb and put it on C, which is the first note of the scale. Now notice when I do that, the third finger will tend to fall over the E, and the fifth finger would tend to fall on the G. So I'm playing the first, third, and fifth notes of that major scale. That gives us what we call a C major chord. Now let's keep our fingers in that spacing, and let's move our thumb up to the next combination, or the next three notes in that pattern. Now we're playing D, F, and A. That makes a D minor chord. Now let's keep going. Let's move our thumb up to E, keeping that same pattern. Now we have E, G, B. And we're still using notes in the C major scale. That's all. That's an E minor chord. Let's do it again. Move the thumb up to F. Now we have F, A, C. That's an F major chord. Now let's move it up to G, the fifth note of the scale. Now we're playing G, B, D. That's a G major chord. Let's continue. Do it again. Move the thumb up to A. This is an A minor chord. A, C, E. And let's do it one more time. Thumb is on B. Now we're playing B, D, F. That's called a B diminished chord. And now notice if we do that again, we end up right back to C major where we started, C, E, G. Now notice these chords are often called triads because they're made up of 3 different notes. Is it possible to have more notes in a chord? Certainly. But let's save it for right now, we'll just stick with the ones that are really necessary to create contemporary harmony. 3 notes are plenty to do a lot for right now. So, and notice all those chords used only the notes in the major scale. Okay, so let's review that. And there's a pattern here that it would be great if you could start to remember. Okay, so starting with C again, C major, D minor, E minor, F major, G major, A minor, B diminished, C major. Now notice the pattern. Okay, the first chord was major, second chord minor, third chord minor, fourth chord major, fifth chord major, sixth chord minor, seventh chord diminished. Now, what do we mean by minor and major? Well, I'll get into that later in this video. Just keep in mind each of those names refers to the color of the chord or the particular sonic signature each one has. When you're playing these chords in the beginning, they may sound relatively alike to you. You may not hear a difference between them. That's perfectly normal. As you get playing these, your ears start to develop and you start to become aware and sensitive to the differences between each of these types of chords. But for now, if that doesn't happen, don't be concerned. That's perfectly normal. Our ears have to be trained to pick up things like that. Okay, so now the great thing about that sequence of chords is that it's exactly the same in every key. Or no matter what scale we do, if we take those chords following that pattern, stack those notes like we just did, no matter what key we're in, we create 7 chords with those same names. Major, minor, minor, major, major, minor, diminished. All right, let's try that in another key, see what happens. Remember our G major scale, where we have to use F sharp? Let's try the same thing. Now, the only difference is, whenever we get to an F, we're going to make it F sharp, of course, to keep it within the G major scale. Okay, so let's start here. G major, A minor, B minor, C major, D major, E minor, F sharp diminished, G major. Okay, I'll do that one more time. Remember, same pattern. Major, minor, minor, major, major, minor, diminished. Every key has the same chord pattern if we just follow the stacking of the notes. Okay, I'll do that one more time. G major, A minor, B minor, C major, D major, E minor, F sharp diminished, G major. Now, let's try that in another key. Let's see if our pattern holds. Okay? F major scale. Remember, we played, that's the one with the B flat. Okay, let's try the same pattern. We're going to keep that stacking of notes. We do the first, third, and fifth notes to start off, and then we just move that pattern up the scale. Okay? So remember the pattern for the chords also. Major, minor, minor, major, major, minor, diminished. Okay, let's see if that works in the key of F. That's the first chord, F major. And notice in each of these 3-note chords, the bottom note where my thumb is the name of the chord. Okay, so we have F major, G minor, remember the B flat, A minor, B flat major, remember the B flat, C major, D minor, E diminished, back to F major. So notice in each of the 3 keys we did, that pattern held. The pattern is, again, for those triads, major, minor, minor, major, major, minor, diminished. Now in each of those keys, we built those chords from various steps of the scale. For example, in the C major scale, this is the first step, or the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So in a scale, we can number those notes so we can refer to them. Now notice if we play the G major scale, we're going to have the same relationship. This is the first note in the G major scale. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And we can do the same thing in the F major scale. That's the first note of the scale. Remember I said in major scales, the first note is the most important. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Notice 8 is the same as 1. You may have heard the term octave. Okay, so from this note to this note is the distance of 1 octave. They're the same letter names, but of course this one is a higher pitch. Okay, so notice we've built 7 chords from each major scale. Now you might think, well, Bill, that's a lot of chords to remember. How am I going to remember all those? Well, I'll show you the way to practice them first of all. But the second thing is, notice there's a lot of repetition of chords in each of those keys. For example, the C major chord is the first chord in the key of in the C major scale. It's also in the key of G. We see that same chord. And it's also in the key of F. So there's a lot of duplication in the chords between these 3 keys. And that will happen as we go through other keys as well, which we're going to do in future lessons. So, but the main thing is, if you only get 3 keys and understand them thoroughly, that's a great step, okay? And that may be all you need, okay? This and a little more information may give you plenty of information to work with to get playing. So, but let me do a quick explanation of what we mean by those 3 terms, major, minor, and diminished, just in case you're curious, okay? Okay, so stay with me on this. Now remember we talked about half steps back in the first lesson. A half step is the distance from one key to the next one, okay? Now we use half steps to measure the distance between notes. It's the distance between the notes that gives a chord its particular flavor or sound. So I'll show you what I mean. Let's take our C major chord that we've been playing. Now let's look at the distance between the first and the middle note. Okay, let's count the half steps. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So notice there's 4 half steps between these 2 notes. What's the distance between these 2? 1, 2, 3. So a major chord has this formula or this setup. 4 half steps, then 3 half steps. Let's take a look at the major chord and see if that holds up. Here's our F major chord. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yes. 1, 2, 3. That works as well. So a major chord is built from 4 half steps stacked over 3 half steps, or on top of that, 3 half steps. Now let's look at a minor chord, see if there's a difference. Here's our D minor chord. Let's count the half steps. 1, 2, 3. Okay, 3 half steps there. Let's count the next. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 half steps. So that has a different formula of half steps, which is the reason it sounds different. Let's look at another minor chord. How about E minor? Let's check that one. 1, 2, 3 half steps. 1, 2, 3, 4 half steps. Okay, so what we've determined is the major chord has 4 half steps, then 3 half steps. The minor chord has 3 half steps, then 4 half steps. That's why it sounds different. Now let's look at our different chord, the one we didn't talk about, the diminished chord. That's the 7th chord in each group. Let's look at this one. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. So notice the diminished chord has 3 half steps and 3 half steps. So that's why each of these chord types sounds different. As I said, we'll discuss in future lessons how we can use that to our advantage and how we're going to use all this to create songs and to play various songs. But we have to do this one step at a time. So how to practice these chords? Here's how I'd recommend doing it. Start with C major again, and we're just going to stack those chords and name them. Get used to saying the names of them. I would even say them out loud if you can do it. So that'll more solidly lock it in. So, and feel free to write these, to refer to a reference sheet in the beginning until you have the pattern memorized. C major, D minor, E minor, F major, G major, A minor, B diminished, C. Now once you get comfortable with that, you can also descend if you wish. But just to save time, let's go on to the next one. And as I'm doing that, notice I'm really watching the keyboard to lock in what they look like too. Let's do G major. Key of G, F sharp. G major, A minor, B minor, C major, D major, E minor, F sharp diminished, G major. Now you just might want to do those two at first and just stay with those for a while, as long as it takes to get comfortable with it. Then when that gets easy, now let's go on to the third, which is the key of F, or the F major scale. Remember, B flat. F major, G minor, A minor, B flat major, C major, D minor, E diminished, F major. I can descend if I want to. F major, E diminished, D minor, C major, B flat major, A minor, G minor, F major. So again, our pattern, and I'm being repetitive, but I'm doing that on purpose, of course. The pattern is major, minor, minor, major, major, minor, diminished. And as I said, that's the same in all of the keys. So once you can do it comfortably in those three, that will give you a perfect foundation for moving into other keys if you feel you're going to need them. Okay? And then you can start to learn them at your own pace. There again, this sounds like a lot of information, but as you start to get through it, you'll be surprised at how the pattern will start to lock in. And because once things make sense, it's much easier to learn them. Imagine trying to learn a long series of random numbers. It's not easy. However, if there's a pattern, it's much easier to remember. So that's one of the benefits of music theory. Once you know the pattern, you can apply it to every case. Okay? All right, so thank you. This has been a little more intense video than the previous one. But thanks very much for hanging in there. And again, if you have any questions, comments, criticisms, whatever, please leave them in the comments section below. Have a nice day, and thanks for watching.